The morning was cold and gray, and the city moved fast around the streets where people walked without looking at each other. Near an old bus stop sat a young homeless girl named Maya, and she was small and thin with a worn jacket and broken shoes, but her eyes were calm and kind. She had learned long ago how to stay quiet and invisible because that was the only way to survive each day. People passed her again and again, but no one stopped and no one cared, and Maya had accepted that silence as part of her life. Maya had no home and no family, and every day she woke up on the same pavement hoping for food or a little kindness. She did not ask for much, and she never begged loudly. She only watched the city and listened to sounds and waited for night to come again. Even in hunger and cold her heart stayed soft, and she still believed the world could be good. Across the busy road a small brown dog suddenly ran into traffic. The dog was scared and confused, and his legs slipped on the wet road. Cars honked loudly and drivers shouted, but everyone stayed inside their vehicles. No one wanted to stop, and no one wanted trouble. The dog cried out in fear, and the sound reached Maya clearly. Without thinking, Maya stood up and ran forward. Her heart beat fast, but her feet did not slow. She raised her hands to warn the cars, and her voice echoed across the road. One car stopped suddenly, and another turned away just in time. Maya reached the dog and picked him up carefully. His body was shaking badly, and his eyes were full of fear. Maya held the dog close to her chest and spoke softly to him. She told him he was safe now and that no car would hurt him. The dog slowly calmed down and rested his head against her arm. Maya felt his warmth and for a moment forgot her own cold hands. She carried him back to the sidewalk and sat down again. People nearby began to notice what had happened. Some looked surprised and some whispered to each other. A few nodded quietly, but no one stepped closer. Maya placed the dog beside her, and he stayed there without moving. He trusted her fully, and that made her smile for the first time that day. A black luxury car soon stopped near the bus stop. The door opened, and a young boy stepped out. His name was Leo, and he wore clean clothes and shiny shoes. His face showed worry and anger as he looked around. When he saw the dog sitting next to Maya, his expression changed quickly. Leo pointed at Maya and shouted loudly that the dog was his. He said she had stolen him, and his voice was sharp and accusing. The crowd froze and everyone turned to look at Maya. The sudden attention made her body stiff and her breath slow. Maya looked up at Leo with wide eyes and shook her head gently. She did not understand why he was shouting. She tried to explain, but no words came out. The dog pressed closer to her leg and refused to move. Leo walked closer and repeated his claim again and again. He said his family was rich and that the dog was expensive. People around them began whispering, and some nodded at his words. Others looked uncertain but stayed silent. Maya felt fear rise inside her chest. She had been blamed before for things she never did. She knew how quickly people believed bad stories about someone like her. Her hands shook as she hugged her knees and looked down. The dog suddenly stood up and barked once. He moved in front of Maya, as if protecting her. His small body blocked her from Leo, and the crowd noticed this strange action. Some people looked confused and others stepped back slightly. A man from the crowd asked what really happened. Leo answered quickly and repeated his story. Maya finally found her voice and spoke softly. She said she only saved the dog from the road. Her voice was weak but honest. The crowd grew quiet again. Some people remembered seeing the girl run into traffic. Others still looked unsure. The tension filled the air, and Maya felt trapped between fear and hope. The dog stayed by her side and would not leave. His loyalty spoke louder than words. Maya gently touched his head and whispered calming sounds. She did not know what would happen next, but she knew she had done the right thing. The city sounds returned slowly as people waited for the truth to come out. Maya stayed seated on the cold ground, holding onto the dog and hoping someone would finally listen. The crowd stood still as the dog remained in front of Maya, and his small body showed courage beyond his size. People looked at each other, and some began to remember the moment when the girl ran into the road. A woman whispered that she saw the girl stop the cars. A man nodded slowly and said the dog would have been hurt if she did not act. Leo crossed his arms and looked annoyed. He said again that the dog belonged to him and that his family would never lie. His voice was confident and loud, and he expected everyone to agree with him. He looked at Maya as if she was nothing more than a problem. Maya stayed quiet for a moment, and then she spoke again in a soft voice. She said she did not steal anything, and she only helped the dog. Her words were simple and honest, and there was no anger in her tone. She looked down because she was afraid to look at so many faces watching her. The dog turned his head and looked at Leo. He did not move toward him. Instead, he sat back beside Maya and pressed against her leg again. This small action made the crowd uneasy. People expected the dog to run to his owner, but he did not. A man stepped forward and asked Leo to call the dog by name. Leo hesitated for a moment and then said a name loudly. The dog did not respond. The man asked him to try again. Leo repeated the name with more force, but the dog stayed still. Murmurs spread through the crowd, and some people began to doubt Leo. A woman said dogs always know their owners. Another person said the dog looked calm only with the girl. The air felt heavy with questions. Leo became angry and said the dog was scared and confused. He said the girl probably tricked him. He reached forward to grab the dog. The dog stepped back and barked again. Maya quickly wrapped her arms around the dog to protect him. People reacted immediately, and someone told Leo to step back. The man from earlier stood between them and said no one should touch the dog until things were clear. Leo looked shocked because no one had ever spoken to him like that before. Maya felt tears in her eyes, but she did not cry. She focused on breathing and staying calm. The dog licked her hand, and that small gesture gave her strength. She had protected him once, and now he was protecting her. A police officer walking nearby noticed the crowd and came closer. He asked what was happening. People began explaining all at once. The officer raised his hand and asked for calm. He listened carefully as different voices shared their version. One woman explained how the dog ran into traffic. Another man explained how the girl saved him. Leo then spoke and said the dog was his and that the girl stole him after. The officer listened without judging. The officer asked Maya to explain again. She told the story slowly and clearly. She said she saw the dog in danger and she helped him. She said she never tried to take him away. Her voice stayed steady even though her heart was racing. The officer then looked at the dog and knelt down slowly. He called the name Leo had given, but the dog did not respond. Then the officer held out his hand toward Maya, and the dog moved closer to her instead. The crowd watched closely and silence filled the space. The officer stood up and said they needed proof of ownership. He asked Leo if he had anything to show. Leo looked uncomfortable and said his father would handle it. A luxury car door opened again and an older man stepped out. He was tall and calm, and his eyes were sharp. This was Leo, father, and he looked around to understand the situation. Leo quickly ran to him and spoke loudly. The father listened quietly and then turned his attention to Maya. He studied her worn clothes and tired face. For a moment he said nothing. Maya felt small under his gaze, but she did not look away. The father asked Maya what happened. She told the same story again without changing a word. The truth came out naturally and calmly. The dog stayed beside her the entire time. The father then asked the officer if anyone else saw the incident. Several people stepped forward and confirmed the girl's story. The father nodded slowly as each person spoke. He looked at Leo with a serious expression. He asked him why the dog did not respond to his call. Leo had no answer. The father sighed and placed a hand on his son's shoulder. The moment felt heavy and important. Maya sensed that something was about to change. The crowd waited quietly, and the dog rested his head on her knee. The father took a deep breath and said they would settle this properly. He said no one would be blamed without truth. His voice was firm and calm, and it surprised everyone. Maya did not know what would happen next, but for the first time she felt that someone powerful was listening. The street that once ignored her now stood as her witness, and the story was far from over. The street felt different now, and the noise of the city faded into the background as everyone waited for the next step. The father stood quietly while the officer spoke to him with calm respect. Maya remained seated on the ground, and her back felt sore, but she did not move because the dog rested against her and needed her close. The father asked the officer what could be done to find the truth. The officer explained that sometimes dogs show their choice through behavior. He said animals remember care and fear very clearly. The father listened carefully and nodded. The officer suggested taking the dog a few steps away and watching who he followed. The crowd agreed and gave space. Maya slowly stood up and her legs felt weak from stress and cold. The dog stayed close and looked up at her face. Leo stood on the other side with his arms crossed and his face tight with frustration. He called the dog again with the same name, but his voice sounded unsure this time. The dog did not move and only looked back at Maya. The officer gently guided the dog a short distance away and then stepped back. He asked Maya to stay where she was. He then asked Leo to call the dog once more. Leo raised his voice and repeated the name. The dog looked around and then walked back toward Maya without hesitation. The crowd gasped softly and several people exchanged looks. The meaning was clear to everyone watching. The father closed his eyes briefly and then opened them again. He walked toward Maya slowly and knelt in front of her. This action shocked the crowd because no one expected a man like him to kneel on a sidewalk. He asked Maya where she slept at night. She answered honestly and said she stayed wherever she could find safety. He asked if she had family, and she said she did not know where they were. Her voice stayed steady even though her heart felt heavy. The father listened without interrupting. He then asked how long she had been living on the street. Maya said it had been many months and each day felt longer than the last. The dog rested his head against her leg as she spoke. The father stood up and turned to Leo. His voice was calm but firm. He said accusing someone without truth was wrong. He said wealth did not give anyone the right to harm another person's reputation. Leo looked down at the ground and his shoulders dropped. He said he panicked when he could not find the dog. He admitted he did not think before shouting. The words came out slowly and with regret. The father placed a hand on his son's shoulder and told him this was a lesson he needed to learn. He said kindness mattered more than pride. The crowd watched silently and some nodded in agreement. The officer announced that no crime had been committed. He said the girl acted bravely and saved a life. His words brought relief to Maya's chest, and she let out a long breath she did not realize she was holding. People began clapping softly, and some smiled at Maya. A woman stepped forward and offered her a warm scarf. Maya accepted it with shy gratitude and wrapped it around her neck. The father then asked Maya what she planned to do next. She said she did not know and she would return to her usual place before nightfall. The answer hurt the father more than he expected. He looked at the dog and then back at Maya. He asked if she would allow him to help the dog receive care. Maya hesitated and then nodded because she wanted the dog to be safe. The father promised the dog would be treated well and that Maya would be welcome to visit. He gave his word clearly and seriously. Maya believed him because his eyes showed honesty. Leo stepped forward slowly and apologized to Maya. His voice was quiet and sincere. He said he was sorry for hurting her with his words. Maya nodded and accepted the apology without anger. The crowd slowly began to leave, but many looked back at Maya with new respect. She felt strange being seen in a different way. The street no longer felt cold in the same way. The officer said goodbye and returned to his patrol. The father opened the car door and waited. The dog looked at Maya once more before stepping toward the car. Maya felt a deep ache but also peace. Before leaving, the father handed Maya a small card. He said if she ever needed help she could come to the address written on it. He said it was not charity but responsibility. The car drove away slowly and disappeared into traffic. Maya stood still holding the card tightly. The scarf warmed her neck and the memory warmed her heart. She sat back down at the bus stop and looked around. The city continued moving, but something inside her had changed. She was still homeless, but she no longer felt invisible. The dog had found safety, and she had found dignity. The day was not over yet, and Maya felt that her story was still unfolding. The evening light slowly covered the city, and shadows stretched across the streets as Maya remained near the bus stop holding the small card in her hand. The events of the day replayed in her mind again, and each moment felt unreal. For the first time in many months she felt seen and heard and respected. Maya waited until the crowd fully disappeared before standing up. She walked slowly through the familiar streets, and every step felt lighter than before. The scarf around her neck kept her warm and reminded her that kindness still existed in the world. As night came closer, Maya reached the quiet place where she usually rested. She sat down and looked at the sky and wondered what tomorrow might bring. She had never planned ahead before because survival only allowed thinking about the present. The next morning Maya woke early and the card was still safe in her pocket. She looked at it many times, unsure if she should go. Fear tried to stop her, but hope pushed her forward. She decided to walk to the address written on the card. The building was large and clean and surrounded by trees. Maya stopped at the gate feeling unsure of herself. A guard noticed her and asked why she was there. Maya showed the card and spoke the name of the man she met. The guard nodded and allowed her inside. Her heart beat fast as she entered a place so different from her world. Inside the building the father was waiting. He smiled gently when he saw Maya. He welcomed her and asked if she was hungry. Maya nodded, and soon warm food was placed in front of her. As she ate, the father spoke about helping her return to school and find a safe place to stay. He said, every child deserved a future. Maya listened quietly and tears filled her eyes, but she kept eating. Leo entered the room and greeted Maya respectfully. He asked if she was feeling better today. Maya nodded and thanked him for apologizing earlier. Leo smiled and said he was learning to be better. The dog walked into the room happily and ran straight to Maya. He jumped gently and rested his head on her lap. Maya laughed softly and hugged him. The bond between them was strong and natural. The father watched this moment carefully. He said the dog had chosen Maya clearly. He asked if she would like to help care for him while she stayed nearby. Maya agreed with joy. Days passed and Maya slowly adjusted to a new routine. She attended classes and learned to read better. She slept in a warm room and ate full meals. The streets became a memory instead of a home. Maya still remembered where she came from and never forgot those who remained unseen. She shared her story with others and inspired kindness wherever she went. People listened to her words because they came from truth. The father kept his promise and supported her growth without expecting anything back. Leo became a friend instead of an accuser and learned humility through her strength. The dog stayed by Maya's side always and reminded her of the day everything changed. A single brave moment had opened a door she never knew existed. Maya looked forward to the future now and believed in herself. She was no longer just a homeless girl. She was someone who mattered, and her journey had only begun.